Yes, what an absolute pleasure and an honor, sir. Welcome to our little slice of madness this morning. Thank you so much for the early start. Jonathan, what a rare pleasure to be able to plug into one of rugby's greatest minds. And I know you are quite humble about what you've achieved, but from our rugby watching perspective, it's been awesome to see your journey over the years. But it has come to an end, or at least has it come to an end? How are you coping with retirement? What was the push to do that?
Thanks for being on the show. Look, I'm 47 and the time was always going to come round about now to give it up, and I made a decision at the end of 2012 to give myself one more year, just to prove to myself more than anything that I could do it one more time. And then, you know, I couldn't have really ended with a better game than a Currie Cup final. So, yes, I could have carried on for a bit longer, but it's the same work. It's repetitive work, and it's time, you know, for me, it was time to move on.
And physically grueling as well. I think you stood out as a referee that would stay at pace with our players. You really were a physical referee and someone who seemed to be really invested in the game of rugby. This really is your first love, and I would imagine getting to the point of being able to write the book, sharing some of the incredible moments that you've shared, that must have been quite a process to go through.
Yeah, look, I'd never rate myself as a speed freak. I was pretty much a cart, I was pretty much a cart horse, but prided myself that I was able to, you know, keep fit. Never failed a fitness test in all my time. Wow. So that was pretty cool. The motivation behind the book, it was really just, you know, just about putting my career down in writing. I always thought once I made it, it was a good story, in many places inspirational for some people who also came from backgrounds that didn't necessarily involve, you know, rugby. And I'm very proud of my achievements, but also, like you said, it's, you know, I think a lot of people could have, you know, did the work I did, but perhaps it is just the insight and the level of commitment that allowed me to stay at the top for such a long time.
How difficult was it now having to put this unbelievable career, all of these front row seat experiences that you've had to some of the greatest moments in rugby? How did you go through that process and decide what to incorporate?
Yeah, that was hell of a tough. I mean, look, it's a hell of a long career. Fortunately, I kept stats for 30 years of all my games. So it was easy to go through the listings and see which games, what stood out, which was fantastic. I must say I didn't enjoy the editing process, you know, the nitpicking of this word and that word.
Being officiated over.
Yeah, exactly, being controlled. So that was tough for me, and to go through that over and over again. I mean, by the 7th time I read the book, it's less appealing than the first time, I must say. But it was a great experience. I must say that the putting it together was tough. But now that it's out there in its format, end of book one, and it's a bestseller.
I was going to say, that's got to be gratifying to know that people are that interested in what has been an unbelievable life path.
Yeah, look, I think it's the first refereeing book that's been a bestseller, so I'm very proud of it from that perspective. I'm grateful to Mike Burr for his collaboration. And there's some very good stories. I don't think it's just a rugby book. I mean, obviously I'm involved in sport, but I think it's a book that anyone can read, and you'll find little bits and pieces that are interesting.
Yeah, I have to ask, what stands out for you? I know it's impossible to highlight just one moment, but when you look back now, what really stands out for you?
I think the game that defined my career was in August 2000. I reffed a Bledisloe Cup game. Yes, I'd been refereeing for 17 years, but that concertinaed all into the 80 minutes that, you know, the RB was basically having a test with me on the field and saying, this is the big game. We're actually testing you now. And the game actually did test me. You know, I'd done previous test matches in the Six Nations, and I'd been doing Super Rugby for 4 seasons, but that was the game that really stood out. And in the book, I don't really go into the detail of games that I refereed because I think that's boring. But in this particular case, I made an exception because the game was dramatic. It was a wild shootout between the 2 top teams in the world, and I did it quite well, had a dramatic ending. And I think that type of courage that I showed in that game probably highlighted to the RB authorities that I had what it took to operate at that level.
Who was the toughest to officiate over? Which teams did you struggle with?
Well, certain teams struggled with me more than anything.
Yes,
I've put a little chapter there. You know, the Waratahs are a team that really struggled with me. They won 4 out of 22 games. And I didn't enjoy it at all, but it was just one of those statistics that kept following me around, and I had to just referee each game as it unfolded in front of me. When I was growing up, you know, going through the ranks, blokes like Kobus Visser, Helgard Miller. They were like really testing for a young up-and-coming referee. And then later on, you know, people who I have great respect for, like George Gregan, Andrew Mertens, Brian O'Driscoll. They're really like they're pretty intense about their work.
Very strong personalities.
Strong characters, and I respected that, and I think for the most part they respected the work I had to do.
I think, and we could see that on the field. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what is going on in South African rugby at the moment. Looking at the Super 15, where have we gone astray? Do the Sharks have a hope in your mind in the playoffs, of course, this weekend?
Yeah. Look, I'm tipping the Sharks to win this weekend. They did get hammered by the Highlanders in the league game early on. You know, and I think they've got a team that can challenge for honours. I do think the Waratahs are the best team in the competition.
Okay.
And I think possibly they will...
I hope the Waratahs fans heard that, all right? There was no bias here throughout his career.
No. I tipped them in the beginning of the season. I said the final be between the Crusaders and the Waratahs before one game had been played. I could be wrong. It could be, you know, the other way around. But I still think that they've got the team, they've got the game that can win the tournament. The Crusaders have got a game that can win the tournament. The Sharks are by far our best outfit, but there are holes in the armoury, and that's been shown up recently.
Yeah, certainly in the last 2 weeks. So we have to build towards now the Rugby World Cup. What does this say about South African rugby, the fact that our franchises are struggling so much at the moment?
Yeah, I was a lot more bullish a couple of years ago about the prospects, and when I look at how our Southern Hemisphere superpowers have gone, I think they've taken the game to a new level, and I think we've got stuck a little bit. There's some teams that were a bit unlucky. I don't know if you remember, the Bulls went overseas, and they've got a very young team, inexperienced team, and they lost all their games by 7 points or less. And I think if they could have translated a couple of those, they would have got a lot more confidence. But having said that, we still occupy, you know, 4 of the bottom 5 spaces on the log. That's not good enough for South Africa. And I think possibly the game has actually moved on a little bit, and we're stuck, and we need a little bit more game development, player development, just to understand where the game has gone.
Well, I know you have a very strong focus on development and working with our schoolboys in particular.
Yes.
So I know the future does look bright with a beautiful mind like yours still in the game. Jonathan, thank you so much. Caught It Like It Is a riveting read, and like you say, not just for rugby fans out there, but just an incredible life path. Also running concurrently with some of the most awesome experiences that South Africans have been able to appreciate. So it is a page-turner. Go out there and get it. Support a fantastic man who has supported South African rugby with all of his heart and his spirit. Awesome to have Jonathan Kaplan on the show this morning.